the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Thank you for joining us. Today is May 23rd, 2018. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here in Eugene, Oregon. We really appreciate everybody that listens, and I know you're disappointed. You were expecting Jerome Hebert, but the Sane Environmentalist on YouTube, but he asked me to fill in for him. He is going out house hunting this morning, and so he had an appointment, I guess, with somebody super early, and so here I am. And guess what? We have a really great surprise. I called up my friend Louisa Hamachek, a Northwest activist. She runs several websites and is a teacher of children and has a really good concept, been fighting the nuclear industry for quite a long time. She's one of the old-time activists who didn't give up. That's why I really love Lou. So, Louisa, thank you for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you tell people about your websites? Because I know you maintain a couple of websites, don't you?
I try to. I mainly, the Nuke Info Project is a project and effort of myself and a few other friends of this area to round up the radioactive information, the information about radioactive sites in the Northwest. That's Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And then now we're stretching up into British Columbia and up to Alaska because the Northwest is really Cascadia and the Columbia River Basin, which starts up in the Canadian Rockies and the west side of them and winds its way down into the Columbia Plateau to Hanford. And then on from there. And at Hanford is a Columbia generating station. And then the Columbia keeps going down through Hood River to Portland, Careens, northwest, and out to the ocean in Astoria. And so everything that comes out from there is part of this entire huge Columbia nation, this salmon nation, they used to call it, until they put the dams up. And now the dams have blocked the salmon from going all the way up, but the Columbia and Snake River, which comes in right about where Hanford is from further west, reaches all the way to the Yellowstone National Park. And the Snake River comes all that way. So there's a whole lot of information, and there's about 10 radioactive sites in that area. And so Nuke Info Project, NIP, Northwest, we research these sites and go travel to them, talk to the people around there and find out more information, take pictures, try and get personal about it in the Northwest instead of just websites. I like to travel there, and I take people with me a couple times a year to the Columbia Plateau, the Columbia Basin.
You've asked me several times. I do not want to go there. I really like. It feels creepy up there. It's beautiful, but it feels really bizarre to me. It feels very creepy. But look, I don't want to get sidetracked on how creepy it looks. I want to talk about our action today, because we made an appointment with Pete DeFazio. And the reason I want to talk about this is sort of
Pete is a representative. Everybody who's listening, he's in Congress.
Right.
And federal U.S. Congress.
That's
is
right.
Pete DeFazio,
the House of Representatives. He's our representative for this district. We live in Lane County, and he covers a large part in Oregon. He's been in Congress for a long time. He's an old timer, but he's on the right side of most issues. But we made an appointment to go see him to tell him about the urgency of closing the Columbia Generating Station and getting on the right side of pressuring the representatives, because there's a lot of pushback from Washington. They love that generating station. It brings in, I think, $81 million into the state every year.
And just to put this in context, though everybody's been listening to you for a while, but to put it in context, the Columbia Generating Station is a nuclear power plant. It's been operating since the 80s, early 80s, at the site of where they made the nuclear bombs, the atom bombs, Hanford. Hanford is now where the U.S. has dumped a lot of nuclear waste and left it from the old days of 7 reactors making plutonium ferociously in order to combat the Russians, the Soviets during the Cold War. And then they said in the efforts to stop the craziness of the Cold War, which kind of ended in 1989, 1990, kind of. They'd like to say it did when the Soviet Union had perestroika and broke apart, and as if they didn't care. But it's still happening in a different way that's harder to figure out, rather than just Russian versus U.S. Now we have, 8 countries with nuclear programs, and our country, for some reason, is they've shut down all the other reactors at Hanford, but they're keeping this nuclear generating station for a little bit of electricity. 2% maximum of the electricity of the Northwest is coming out of this old, breaking down, dangerous nuclear power plant. It could kill us of the whole Northwest, any direction the wind's going. If it had a meltdown and spewed fallout like Fukushima did and like Chernobyl did, and then
it would be far worse. That's what I call the proximity
are in the air
factor.
And it comes down. You think it would be far worse? Boy,
I think
Chernobyl
it would be
was
far.
crazy.
It would be because of the proximity factor, because it is 12.7 miles from the Hanford tanks. Because if there is a nuclear meltdown,
those are tanks of radioactive gook. They are the waste.
It's like the old tools.
Bombs.
It was the old tools, and like their old stuff that they used to make the tools. The most dangerous tanks is the mix of it. It's not just the chemicals and the nuclear fuel. It's all the tools and the equipment and all the stuff that they can't use. It's all metal, and so it's in these big tanks of sludge that have to constantly be churned.
They have these. Well, they have this with pieces of plutonium in it, radioactive, toxic, chemically. Like lighter fluid, or rather like fingernail polish, evidently kind of a stink like that. So it's got that fumey chemical pollution. It's got heavy metals that give nerve damage, and it's got radiation from the plutonium and uranium pieces and other radioactive materials that are caught in the gook. And how many tanks? There's these huge, big tanks that were buried, and then they were leaking because they put them in single thickness steel that rusted. Go figure. And the heat of these things, it's still hot, and so it pulls water towards it, which is like makes corrosion faster. So something like a third of them, I believe, have sprung leaks. So they've been kind of desperately, but not desperate in my opinion, sucking the gook out of them, putting them into newer tanks. But they haven't managed to capture all that, and some is going, and they've only gotten to some of them. And their process of what they do with it after they suck it out of there was supposed to have been figured out, of mixing it with glass and heating it up a lot and then letting it be solid when the glass cools down, vitrification. But their vitrification plant kept having problems because it was the first time the world's ever done this thing, and they've never designed it before. And they famously, not famously, it didn't get out into the world, but I was passing by Hanford going to a wonderful old gathering in the Tenasket Valley north of Hanford, the Tenasket Barter Fair, and I always swing by to check out things around Hanford and talk to people around there if I'm going up to the Canadian border. And there was a newspaper, and they just fired the local designer, manager, creator of the vitrification plant for saying that they should stop the process because he realized that it could have a meltdown because the particles, when in a fluid state like that of heavy metal, pieces of plutonium can drift down to the center towards each other, and if two get close to each other, they can create a chain reaction of a nuclear reaction, and the whole thing could go critical and become like an atom bomb, in a sense.
And as I like to say, I hope everyone's having a good cup of coffee right now in the morning. Like, this is such heavy stuff to listen to, like boom. I feel like we smack people in the head with this information first thing in the morning. This is like boom. But you know what? We wake up, we listen to NPR, and they tell us all this stuff.
Because this is I think you should all get a shot of whiskey, because listen to what Lonnie just turned up. I mean, we've been busy at lots of things for a few days, but give us a break. We just said, oh dear, when we were planning for this talk, we said a few days ago, oh, it looks like they're trying their best to pass the market test to see that they're not shutting down this crappy nuclear power plant again because of an unknown scram.
Because it's always having problems. It always does stuff.
And
here
so,
we
Lonnie,
5:18. We read this 2 days ago, I think, on Monday. I always read the nuclear alerts. If I don't have a guest, my go-to is to go to the nuclear alerts, because just to find out.
And I've been looking at the past. I dove into the planet Earth and have been researching the current in the last 10 years research on earthquakes that could affect the Columbia Generating Station to break its cooling system. That worries me, and that could lead to this meltdown. So then, Lonnie, tell them what happened.
Well, I read this the other day, so our regular listeners might. The Columbia Generating Station was put into a hot shutdown on the 18th, and there has been no notification that everything is fine. Now, it says the plant is in normal electrical alignment, and the off-site power is available to the site. Off-site power is available to the site.
That means the cooling systems can run even with electricity, if there's a shutdown of the big generator.
Being maintained. Recirculation pump is running. No emergency cooling systems actuated or injected. But they did have all control rods inserted, and reactor power is being maintained subcritical. So the point is,
they can shove in these carbon rods to go chill out the nuclear reaction when they're worried. So they have inserted them all. It hasn't completely shut it down. That's an interesting thing. It's the Columbia Generating Station keeps being shut down by these scram things that are so petty that they don't make big news, but very scary to me, because they keep going, that didn't seem to be a problem. I guess we'll turn it on again. And they keep doing this, which scares me, because one of them could be. But they keep having these, which makes it ridiculously can't pass a capitalist test. Can you run your company for a year? It's called a market test. In the market of selling your electricity at the price that people will pay, which is Bonneville Power Administration, who runs all the dams, is who buys the power from them, supposedly a public utility. But, what does public mean? Is it run by the government or run by the people? Is it a company, free capitalism, or is it American government running our power? At any rate, Bonneville Power said a few years back, if this nuclear power plant machine can operate in the black for a year, we're going to turn it off. So we're all excited as nuclear activists anti-nuclear activists trying to get it turned off, that there's no way it's going to pass it, that it keeps getting shut down. And when it has one of these scrams, they go, we better turn it off for a while and dust it off and go look at something and see if we can figure out why it turned itself off. And they do that, and it has to be not making electricity or money for a while. So it was having these scrams. More than 80% of the power plants of United States, which is where there's a ton of nuclear power plants, and so this is crappier machine, more dangerous, more likely to have a accident than 80% of America's nukes. And it keeps doing this, and it's in our area. It's the last commercial nuclear power plant in the Northwest. The Trojan nuke was shut down. That was about 15 miles from Portland, and that was shut down about 20 years ago, after only operating for about 10 years, because there were so many construction faults that they'd have to pay so much money to go back and fix them. They couldn't afford to do that. And now we have to pay in our electric bills for that accident. It wasn't an accident, but it was almost an accident at Trojan. But the economic boondoggle has cost our area a lot, that our rates are raised to pay for that. And if the Columbia Generation station goes and has an accident, I'm curious if our small community electric utilities like Eugene Water and Electric Board, EWEB, and Lane Electric Co-op, which is for the rural people around Eugene, they are part of this larger Columbia Generating Station co-op called Energy Northwest. That is a co-op of cooperatives. It all sounds so great, but we have nothing to do with it. We go to our meetings of our local utilities, and they kind of, when you bring it up, because they don't want people to feel empowered who pay and are supposedly members of a
not only that cooperative. They don't have the courage to balk. The people sitting on the water board don't have the courage, and they don't understand, and they are refusing to understand. Like, I've made several attempts to contact my water board member and have hit a brick wall. They are impossible to get in touch with, period. Yeah. And you hand them stuff and it goes right in the trash. They are not interested.
And I have a very funny thing. I was living in the countryside, and so I was a member of Lane Electric Co-op. So I was up in the mountains, and I was so excited that I finally had a real reason to be a member, and I could go talk to them as a member, because usually I was renting from someone else or something. And I went down there with my friend who we lived together. So we both were members, or we both had bills. Anyways, if you're a bill-paying electric user in an electric cooperative, you are a member. So you can go to membership meetings, and you can talk up, and you can go to the directors and talk to them as a member if you have any issues. And so that's something we all need to do. But we went there, and I'm forgetting the fellow's name, but he was really cool, and he had Elvis Presley, every memorabilia all around his office at Lane Electric Co-op in West Eugene. And we hit it off all about rock and roll and all kinds of things. And then I brought up the subject of Hanford, and because he said, "What can I do for you today?" And I said, I would like the Columbia Generating Station at Hanford to be disconnected from our responsibility, that I don't want my cooperative to participate in the Energy Northwest cooperative. And how can we get Lane Electric to pull out of this? He said, "Oh, that's impossible. It's We buy our electricity from Bonneville Power Administration, and they buy their electricity from, or some of it, 2% or something, from that Energy Northwest nuclear power plant, and so there's nothing we can do about it. And so they put you off like that. So recently I looked up Energy Northwest, the staff of Energy Northwest, and this very Elvis Presley fan works for them now, who was right here in Eugene, who was very personable and wonderful. And he's up there in the company of Energy Northwest right now.
Well, that's a good, see, because to him it's just a job. To him, he does not understand the threat. He thinks that there is no real problem, that we're being hysterical, that if there was a nuclear meltdown, that the government knows how to manage it. That,
right.
Really, seriously. And this is what Pete DeFazio's office, this
Most
is what
people
every
feel
single
that.
person, I mean, there's only a handful of us that understand the gravity
Personally,
of this.
I'd rather not be called on to deal with it when it happens, because I don't know what to do. And that's what most people are like. They're too big of machines, too high-tech for anybody to even consider that they'd understand them to say anything about it. So we're quaffed. We're put off by the big, fat government. Well, guess what? It's our government that runs this whole thing, and they work for us. Congress is our employees. We pay our taxes. They work for us. If we pay our taxes,
technically in the Constitution, the House of Representatives does represent us. The Senate actually represents the government and business interests because corporations are written into our Constitution. So it's very interesting. The House of Representatives, if you read the Constitution, the House of Representatives represents us, the individuals. That's why it's easier. Like our House of Representatives has a constituent liaison office that if you have issues, you can go to them and they will, spend their time, their money, their people to help you solve a problem.
Good. Let me bring
this
into
your
context.
Senator. Now, your senator, unless you're a business, your senator does not have the same.
Thank you for that segue. I want to talk about the businesses around Hanford. I have spent the weekend drooling over a map it's very well worn, which is a highway map of Oregon. The top center of it will put you at Richland, Washington. Actually, the closest town was probably Umatilla. Umatilla is maybe a half-hour drive south of Richland, Washington. Richland is 10 miles south of Hanford. And so if there's a nuclear power plant, Richland is Chernobyl, the village of, meaning it's toast. Yet there's 250,000 people. It gets $2 billion a year in money, talk about business, for trying to figure out that nuclear waste from the bomb making. That is funneled through the Department of Energy that should be working on solar energy and all the other good stuff, but they make bombs. They're the ones who ran the bomb making at Hanford Department of Energy, not the military. And yet it's such a military issue. And so anyways, talk about business. That was a lot of money. But besides that, if you go to a fancy restaurant in Hillsborough, which I did, and I wanted seafood. With my seafood, I wanted wine. The wine came from the choices were dreadful. One came from the Yakima Valley, which is a very popular wine area. That's 1 hour to the west of Hanford. And one came from Walla Walla area, where there's a beautiful ridge between Walla Walla and it goes soon into Idaho to the east. That's east of Hanford, 1 hour, and driving. And if the winds blew, it would be 1 hour and a fast, gusty 60-mile-an-hour wind. But normal winds are about 20, maybe. But if you try to drive, okay, if the winds are blowing south from Hanford, an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours south at a normal pace, it hits Pendleton, Oregon, our most wonderful town of the Eastern Oregon rodeo, the Pendleton Roundup, that's happened as this combined thing of the tribes of the area of entertainment and competition in rodeo stuff, since it was one of the first rodeos, and it brought together the excitement of the pioneers moving into the West with the native tribes. At any rate, the Pendleton...
But Louisa, let's get back to your dinner. with the fish.
Yeah,
the dinner with the fish. You're eating wine from Hanford. You're objecting to eating wine from Hanford, but you're eating fish.
Right, I said, can you please give me another wine list that is not radioactive?
Don't you get it? You're eating radioactive fish. You might as well eat radioactive wine.
Not necessarily. You can eat trout from mountains that are not the ocean.
If you want to eat tritiated trout, go right ahead. Honestly, the whole
I'm not eating radiated trout.
You are
but
eating.
Anyways,
yes, you are. Fish is highly radioactive.
If you want to say that the entire world has radiation.
Yeah, but the problem with fish is
down, that's true. But
Louisa, this is one of the things that John Goffman explained. Fish magnetize the radioactivity because they see it as these minor, small, healthy isotopes like potassium that they need. They misrecognize it. They misrecognize cesium as potassium, and their body magnetizes it 1,000 times. That's what's wrong with eating fish. It is safer. John Goffman said it is safer to drink a gallon of water than to eat, I think he said, a freshwater fish that's been exposed to radioactivity.
That's been exposed to it?
Yes.
But what if you go to a mountain stream that has had a trout that's never
I'm going to tell you what,
exposed
every mountain stream has been exposed and is being exposed to Fukushima right now. For 8 years, we have had nonstop radioactive gas entering the Pacific Ocean and the atmosphere.
No, I don't mean liquid, I mean gas.
I'm talking about the gas. You know what happens with the gas? Okay. It goes up into the atmosphere, and when it rains and snows, it comes down.
Thanks. I wanted to eat that fish. Now I can't. I have to eat barley or something. Darn it. Oh, well.
Exactly.
Anyway.
That's how I feel. I feel the same way. I love fish.
Oh, well.
Me too, but not anymore.
Anyway, let's bring it right back to Hanford businesses, Hanford area businesses, and the Hanford Danger Zone. I like to call it the HDZ, the Hanford Danger Zone, around Hanford and around the Columbia Generating Station, which is, they snuck it in there and pretended it was not at Hanford, and they keep saying near or whatever, but and so Lonnie has the exact mileage of how near it is to tanks and stuff.
12.7.
It's a 40-mile blob of a bend of the Columbia River that's, you can see on maps, north of the Tri-Cities area of Richland, Washington, Pasco, Washington, and Kennewick, Washington. Those three cities compose, and the suburbs of them, 250,000 people. And that's the same size as Spokane, which is to the northwest. And Spokane is famously already got dosed in the Green Run in the 1980s when the our national nuclear laboratories, PNNW, and others up there, PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Labs, and others put out new radiation detectors and released radioactive iodine into the air at Hanford to see how well it was tested and detected by their little monitors around.
Great idea, right?
And there are at least 4,000 people who have joined together with thyroid cancer who grew up. They're my age. They're in their 60s. And they were kids in the 80s when they did this, or they're in their 50s, actually, 50s and 60s. And they're in the Spokane area where the rain dropped it down or the wind dropped it down. The gas came down. It landed on the grass. The cows ate the grass of radioactive iodine, and it went in their milk in the morning with their cereal. Here, Johnny, have your cereal. Have a good day at school. And that began at about 20 to 30 years later, they had thyroid problems, and it was radioactive thyroid. Radioactive iodine will go where any iodine will, and the reason we've had since the 40s or 50s iodized salt is because iodine gets put into we take it like a drug in order to fill up and satisfy our thyroid gland in our chest, neck chest, so it won't absorb any radioactive iodine gases in the air, because we were doing nuclear bomb testing and different things in that time and realized our body... Is that
why we have iodized salt? That's the reason? To help us stave off the radioactivity?
Yes.
Wow.
And it doesn't normally have that, although there's a lot of iodine in seaweed, so that's a way to eat it also. But now we have to worry about seaweed, so who wants it anyways? So figure out how you do it. But your thyroid, luckily, can be yanked out, and you can take pills for the rest of your life that are to imitate all your subtle little emotional juices that come out of your thyroid, which is an endocrine gland thing that is meant to regulate a lot of things in your body, like temperature and other things, sugars and stuff like that.
This is so subversive. Think about how they decided, someone in the government decided to really allow that we are going to change how we process salt so that we can allow the populace to be radioactively contaminated.
No, it's to make us strong against the Russians. It was the idea that we could deal with a radioactive bomb going off in America or anywhere and still not have the population collapse to it. It was a simple way to do it, and it was cheap stuff, iodine, to put it in salt. And I buy that salt. You know, I wonder which one should I get. And I do get the iodized salt just for the little bit of that happening, even though I have pre-Fukushima seaweed I bought from a friend in Corvallis that I trade with him, other things, and I get this seaweed that he has harvested and stored, and so, but anyways, I want to get back to the businesses, because if Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley, who we're going to see next, care mainly about business, there's businesses galore of lots of dairies, meat, wine. There's like 3 directions around Hanford are famous wine districts that any wine connoisseur will tell you, oh, Yakima, Umptinum Ridge wines, oh, yum, yum, and all that stuff. And then Pendleton is one of the most fun, biggest places for tourists to go. There's these wine tours that they're promoting around the world. I think the
other thing is, too, Louisa, the fact that the Columbia Generating Station is losing $500 million a year. It's in the negative.
Okay, but I want to just cover the Hanford Danger Zone businesses, because if what senators will be moved by is money and businesses going out of business, and they're supposed to be watching the business strength of Oregon, our senators, but actually Congress, federal Congress, Congress is officially, if you want to say, is the representatives like DeFazio today. But the Senate, if the Senate is supposed to be making sure American business stays going, there's a couple of things that could really damage America in the business. The storms in the summertime sometimes make a effect on the wind direction from Hanford, and it starts on a spiral as winds and storms go in a spiral, and the spiral will go counterclockwise as they do in the northern hemisphere. Then it'll pick up from Hanford, go north into British Columbia, come back down west, and swoop back to Seattle. And so Seattle area, the whole thing can get dosed, and then it swings back into Oregon, Portland, and then comes swirling around and dissipates farther and goes farther out. And then it all generally moves to the east from there across America to hit Minneapolis, Chicago, Cleveland, then New York, and all that after it's hit Denver, and other things. So generally it's to the north. So it's the northern cities of America will be dosed. And as we saw with Fukushima, this radioactive fallout.
Well, do you think that Seattle will be safe because it's west of there? You know, it's like northwest.
West of the mountains. No, this is the thing. That wind it's not very often, but there's like, it's a lottery game we're playing here, the Washington Lottery, where it could, if it had a meltdown dispute, it goes way up high in the air, and these storms go there. If you've ever gone to Hanford, in the afternoon, the area blows strong winds, and it's like, oh dear, is this dust okay? I just wanted to stay at this campsite. And they don't warn you anything nearby there, which we've gone to hearings there, public hearings that were called by wonderful Jerry Paulette of Heart of America Northwest to come speak up at a public hearing. So we've come out there to things, and we came in the Veterans for Peace bus one time, and we said, well, let's get there and stay the night. And so we found a campground farther away in the direction of the west of Hanford, of Yakima. And it was, the winds blew at us at night, and that wasn't fair. That was to the west. And my son was with us. I wanted him to understand American democracy and that we have the right to petition the government to do something different. So I brought him to the public hearing so he could see me talk and hear other people talk and realize that there's a chance. But the problem was it didn't amount to anything because they just listen to us and say thank you and go away with these little cassettes and throw them in the garbage, seemingly. But
that's exactly what's going to happen to us today. You do realize that?
No, it's not going to, because we are fierce. No, we also are full of love. I like to.
Yeah, Thomas Ackerman says I'm a firecracker, right? So. Yeah,
well, you say in your thing, love is greater than fear. So the fear of this nuclear power plant going off is something that is affecting me because I love my grandchild. My wonderful grandchildren are in Portland. I know that the winds can blow down, shooting down the Columbia Gorge past Hood River. That is a wonderful town that has windsurfing as its greatest business, and it's a big Oregon tourist destination point. And all these wines and all this fruit being grown of apples and all these things around Hood River fruit. And it's on the Columbia River. Let's see, I should know this. 100 miles south or downriver of Hanford. And if the winds blow east on that day, they occasionally do. You can contact the windsurfing guys. Which direction? There's companies, a lot of them in Hood River. And which direction does the wind blow? It's usually fiercely blowing upriver, squirted into the Columbia River Gorge, funneled, going faster and faster, as behind it is the ocean winds blowing from the west, and then it squirts and it goes really fast right towards Hanford, and then it carries the winds past Hanford, farther to the east is the normal thing. And usually, if it goes a little bit north that day, it hits Spokane, and if it goes just straight east, it hits Walla Walla with like 3 colleges and lots of food business and onions. Lots of onions of America come from big Walla Walla onion fields around there. And then Milton Free Water is Oregon.
Louisa, if they had a nuclear meltdown, I don't think they'd tell us. I don't think they would have told us about Fukushima if we hadn't have watched it blow up. For real. It took them a full 3 weeks to tell us they had a very serious, that it was still out of control. It was really...
even that. When Chernobyl happened, the reason it got out of control so bad was the underlings, the county commissioners of the area were scared to tell Gorbachev, the premier of the Soviet Union, that they'd screwed up. And that they were like, I didn't do it. I don't know anything about it. I don't know. And so then Gorbachev was smart, and he said, what? And he sent his Navy SEALs kind of and the KGB guys, and he said, get up there now. Tell me what's going on. And then they came back and said, this is screwed up. And they said, this is bad. And it wasn't reported because the underling, the little people, and the little pawns in the government who were underqualified didn't know what to do, and they didn't want to get blamed for it. And then what was worse was it was shortly there, May Day, and it was the celebration of the country's independence, and the whole country had parades in every town, and they didn't want people to be dismayed that in the big city.
Pripyat? You mean Pripyat?
Well, that's the town right near there, Pripyat, but the city is the big one. Why did I forget it? Anyways, it's like the size of Portland, and it's they had all of their festivals that week outside because of a PR thing that they didn't want people to really know it happened. And so they got dosed badly. All those people playing outside, they should have all stayed inside while that dust came down. And the dust, the particles of a exploded containment building are cement and metal and radioactive parts, pieces of the fuel, the uranium, and if you don't watch out, they mix in leftover plutonium that they don't find enough reasons to make bombs with it. And so they're trying to burn that up. If you don't watch out, they were almost doing that at the Columbia Generating Station, but Heart of America, and I think it was Friends of the Earth, caught them at it and sued them, and they went, oh, okay, we won't do that. You found out. And they call it MOX fuel, so it's mixed uranium and plutonium fuel rods. So that will be particles in the air, and plutonium will kill very rapidly because it's so hot, so radioactive, and anything it touches is dead. A piece of that, and it just sears through life. But luckily, it uses itself up in that radioactivity in a lot less years than the uranium that goes on for millions of years, giving off small amounts of radiation, and is insidiously, like if you inhale that particle, it's going to work on your gushy little wet stuff inside of you and travel around through your blood system to any parts of your body and give you cancer wherever it lodges, and then dislodge from there, and then go be peed out of you, and then go into the stream and be eaten by a fish that gets eaten by not Lonnie. Anyways, it goes up through the vascular systems of little pieces, like particularly depleted uranium that is used as weapons gets exploded. But that's a different issue we'll talk about. But that comes out of this nuclear reactor and nuclear bomb process. Is the leftovers is depleted uranium after they pump up the juicy fudge to become reactor fuel rods. The leftovers is a metal that's super heavy and exciting to soldiers to shoot at distant tanks from their tanks, and it blows them up, and these particles, it burns them up. Pyrophic, I never can say that name, but it's this super instantaneous high heat as this little rocket penetrates the tank, and it does this chemical thing of putting these depleted uranium ceramic microscopic particles in the air. Well, they're very similar to what is going to go up if that scram that happened this week turned out to be the nuclear accident that I'm worried about, which is my main worry is from earthquakes shaking the broken down, brittle pipes, plumbing system of the nuclear power plant. Then the cooling system won't work. It could have a meltdown. This shoots into the air. These particles go dropping down from to the surrounding area. Like definitely, the Tri-Cities, 250,000 souls is 10 miles away. Yes, it will drop on them. Pasco, Richland, and Kennewick, and then all those other towns I was talking about. Ellensburg, with the university in Washington and the rodeo.
This is the thing. It's not even just about being dropped on. You have to live with it. This goes into our groundwater. It goes.
Yes.
This is the urgency about closing
into
all
the groundwater. Right.
We do not have a plan for any of it. Their plan is their new plan. This is their new plan. Let's just bury all the nuke waste in the fracking wells. They're going to build tunnels in the fracking wells and put them in canisters. That's their plan. We already have the fracking well. They've already disrupted the earth. They want to bury the nuclear waste a mile down. They say that it can't get into the groundwater. It can't get into anywhere. And we have a plan to do it.
Granite. They love this. Granitic rock. Granite is where they think they're going to put our country and the world's nuclear waste in granite, deep into granite. So wherever granite is in our country is where they're looking for a place to put it.
Wow.
And they keep hovering around the Nevada
monuments.
test site.
That's all the monuments out in New Mexico and Arizona, right? So this is the point here. When we talk to Pete DeFazio today, I personally am going to bring a letter explaining the proximity factor, which I termed that because I want us to start using it. This is the proximity factor. This is what makes the Columbia generating station so dangerous, is the proximity factor. They're all dangerous, but this one in particular is way too close to the most toxic nuke dump site on the entire planet, even worse than Fukushima. It might be on par. I don't know which one is worse. I don't know.
You've probably said this before, but we should mention it that until our country actually has a safe nuclear waste deposit place, like in Nevada was the Yucca Mountain Project, but the native people and the Nevadans said, no, that's not actually safe. We shouldn't do it there. And it's so that was canceled. Until we have a really safe place to put it, all nuclear power plants that are making electricity for their area must just keep their nuclear fuel rods that are still hot but not pure enough to be used in the machine of the nuclear power plant. They keep them on the site until the country says, oh, good, now we can go to Yucca Mountain again because
that's what they've been doing, because WIP is broken. So they have been keeping their nuke waste on site. And that's the increasing danger, though.
Well, what's the name of WIP? WIP is in Carlsbad, New Mexico.
Yes, but WIP blew up in 2014, and it is only taking a very limited amount of nuclear waste. They say it's open.
When I was a youngster living in New Mexico, I was helping on trying to stop this young little project because it seemed absolutely absurd. Actually, it sounded smart at first. It was to dig holes and bury nuclear waste in the salt deposits that are around Carlsbad, that are these deep, like underneath the ranches, is thick salt in our country. And so they tunneled into that. And so they created what was then called the WIP site, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. Pilot plant was in the what year was I there? In the 70s, and that was when the WIP site was being proposed, and we said no, and we thought we'd just stop that one quick. Now everybody in the country says, oh, gee, the WIP site. We're only going to send half the nuclear waste there. They just keep sending it to what was a pilot plant, an idea that this might work, and then it was proven that water does travel under there. They're not these things all left by themselves. There's streams underground, and that it's not left by itself. There was a pond that came into existence overnight with a large sound on a guy's ranch right near the WIP site back in those days. In the 70s, when they were thinking, could this work? And he said, what the heck? And it was a breccia pipe, and it was broken material from that caved into a cavern underground that had come from the water traveling and dissolving a cavern, and then above it fell down into it, all this rubble, and then there's a pond that developed. So on the surface, so they threw a jug of dye into that pond and poured it into there to see, where is this going to go? Does it go anywhere? And it turned up in Mexico in a village above, down south.
Oh my God.
100 miles away.
Well, ultimately at the waste pilot processing plant, Carlsbad said no to it, and the government basically bullied their way in. They said, we're going to give you $32 million if you let us build. Okay. If you don't let us build, we're going to build, and you don't get the $32 million. So you have a choice. What do you want?
That's crooks. Right.
That's essentially what the Department of Energy did. That's exactly what happened at the waste pot. And the amount of sheep and animals and children and people that died there is off the charts. Do you know what happened? You know what made it close down? We only have about 10 minutes, but our listeners need to understand this is how ridiculous things work within the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They were sending their waste there, and someone decided to save money and order an organic kitty litter to put in the tanks tanks, because evidently we've been putting kitty litter inside the tanks, non-organic kitty litter, because it stabilizes the waste. Well, nobody in the decision-making process decided to ask a scientist, but they decided, we're going to be conscientious and order organic kitty litter. Well, organic kitty litter interacts with radioactivity and causes an explosion because of what it's made from. So they really only needed to use This is why the whip blew up on in 2014 on Valentine's Day, and it was. Yes, and they say it's back to work, but it's really not back to work because the place that blew up is still super highly radioactive and shut off. So there's a big, huge mess under there that we can't even see.
Okay,
or know
let's
about.
Bring it back to the Columbia Generating Station.
Please.
The point is the Columbia Generating Station is a nuclear reactor, the General Electric Mark IV, I think it is, same style as Fukushima, where they've taken this nuclear waste that can't go anywhere, and they put it inside the containment building to store it till it's not radioactive. And as it cools down, it's been polluted, and they can't use it in the machine. They need pure stuff inside the machine. So they take the rods out that are older, and they store them there. And Fukushima exploded right through it all. When there's a meltdown, there's hydrogen gas gets caught up in inside the containment building, and a spark will explode it. And then it goes out in particles that are radioactive all around the area. And then it travels all around the planet, and Fukushima took 26 days for those particles to travel all the way around the North Hemisphere and make it back to Fukushima, which means every rainstorm, every rain drizzle, precipitation pulls is made around pieces of dust, and those are radioactive dust, often from these nasty clouds. Chernobyl did it in 1989. I was in Chicago where the rain fell down. It traveled across most of America till it rained on us in Chicago, and that was so depressing. And then, anyways, those particles are, multiplied by that waste being at the power plant inside there, that it's not just the reactor fuel, it's lots of, the history of that reactor's waste is stored inside the reactor, and when it blows up, all of that stuff blows up. And that waste needs cooling, too. Right, Lonnie? Nuclear waste?
Yes, not only it needs cooling, but, we're also... we're in a seismic freakout right now. We have this volcano going off in Hawaii. What do you think that's doing to the Earth's crust?
Well, I wouldn't say that the planet forever does that. It's just that the news connects us now and internet, so we know this. But the planet is always moving its plates around. And every time it does, then earthquakes happen, and volcanoes create earthquakes. And so let's get back to quickly, because you only have 5 minutes or something we do. But
we have 8 minutes.
The earthquakes. Okay, this is an important thing that in the last 10 years they've developed this magnetic type of scanning of the planet from airplanes and from satellites that can see deeper the fissures of the plates and also all the earthquake fault lines. And probably not all of them. It's our latest technology. And they said, oh, my God, there's a fault line deep 10 miles down right underneath the Columbia Generating Station, underneath Hanford. And recent news is it's connected to the Seattle fault, which is a part of the bigger one called the South Whidbey Island fault. And,
well, what about the Cascadia fault zone? Aren't we part of that?
No. Let me, it's an interesting thing. I, myself, have been freaking out for 10 years about the Cascadia. I've been part of the Red Cross Disaster Assistance Team, which people can join, and the Red Cross is preparing, and usually you take care of people in house fires, but it has a side back thing to prepare for a nuclear accident at Hanford. And there's a pretend scram every year that happens for Red Cross and disaster people and fire department people to be ready. anyways, most of the regular public doesn't know that this is being prepared for. What was the point of that? So the Seattle fault is going to destroy Seattle when it goes, and I was shocked to hear that it's going to be bigger than the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, which the whole country can read about that in the New Yorker, called The Big One article that came out a few years ago, that explains that everything west of I-5 that runs up and down the west coast will be toast. It will have a 9.2 earthquake off the shore, off the Oregon-Washington shore, and Portland will be about 6 by the time it tempers itself down. Anyways, so other scientists told me, hey, don't squawk so much about that. You don't know what you're talking about, because it's not going to make it under the Cascades, the big volcanic mountains, to get to Hanford, so stop being unscientific. So I kind of quieted down a little bit, but now the research found that this deeper fault is part of the big plates of the planet, and it will reach under the Cascades from Seattle area right towards Wallowa Mountains, the top right corner of Oregon.
In this article by the Earth Island Journal,
the Olympic Wallowa Fault,
Lou, in the article that you sent me, the Earth Island Journal, Washington Columbia Generating Station is a seismic tomb bomb. If you read that article, it was written in the earthisland.org. Yes. But the guy says, geologist Bill Balkin says that the whole place is riddled with faults. That's one of the things that makes it so dangerous. It's just riddled with faults. I went to the
USGS thing. Yeah, they've been studying it also for preparing for Hanford and after Hanford. And people say, what about faults? What about faults? So I went to the geology, our country's geology website, and there's been many, many studies. But they don't come out to the public, and they're very technical and hard to understand unless you understand geology. But the Earth Island Journal article pulled it together to allow regular citizens to understand that this is not business as usual time. We have found out that that the Columbia Generating Station was not built strong enough for what is now expected, and that was found out within the last 10 years. It should be shut down as soon as they figure that out.
This was written May 5th, 2014. That'll tell you who. This is why we're going to go to Pete DeFazio's office, and we're going to meet with this gentleman, Dan Whalen. He'll take our information, but we have to do it repeatedly. We can't just be a one-stop shopping. We have to keep going back.
This is the beginning of a start.
We have to become a thorn, and we have to get other people to do the same thing. We need rounds of people going into their congressman's office, their senator's office, and making the same demands. We need
wherever they are in the United States, because this could affect the entire United States.
So, Louisa, we have 30 seconds. I'm going to jump in. We have 30 seconds left. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, KEPW, for carrying our show. Thank you, Jules, at UCY.TV. We really appreciate everything you've ever done for our station and for creating this show and giving voice to people who normally can't be heard. I say put your courage feet on. That means taking action even when you're afraid. Just do it. It's okay. We can do things afraid, folks, because we have got to face this challenge. Love is greater than fear. Happiness is resistance. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, Louisa Hamachek.
Yeah.